What's up, guys? Today is an exciting day. As you can see, we have the Z on the trailer, but we're not headed to the track. We are actually headed to my buddy's shop because we are finally dyno tuning this thing, and we're gonna squeeze every bit of power this little VQ has in it. Just cross your fingers we don't hurt it. Just filling the Tahoe up with some gas. We've got a pretty long drive ahead of us. So I'm gonna hit the road and I'll catch up with you guys at the shop. We made it out to Power Nation shop out here in Bakersfield, California. We're gonna be dyno tuning the Z today. Really excited to see what this thing's capable of. Alright, so we're here, we're getting the Z dyno tune, but before we get it on the dyno, we're actually replacing the fuel pump. Because we're running a wet shot of nitrous, it actually uses fuel like from the factory fuel system. And if we plan on doing more upgrades down the road, maybe running E85, it makes sense to put a bigger pump in it. So chucking a bigger fuel pump in it, and then we'll get this thing on the dyno, we'll do a baseline tune and see what it makes as is, and we'll take it from there. For fuel pump, we went with an AEM 340. This is a drop-in unit got from Z1 Motorsports. It replaces the factory fuel pump and bolts right in. Real simple swap. Fuel pump is swapped. Get this thing warmed up. A few other little odds and ends buttoned up, and then we'll get her on the dyno. All right, we're with Tim here, Power Nation. Walk us through, what are we going to be doing now?
We're going to make some power on this thing. First off, we are going to make a baseline right now. We're going to see what the car is making. And then once we see what the car is making, we will start to get into tuning it. Once we get a good baseline tune in it, then we're going to start throwing a little bit of nitrous at it and see what we get. Right now, we just installed the new fuel pump. Got that all dialed in, so we're going to see what it makes with the new fuel pump, and I'm going to check AFRs and stuff like that, make sure we're getting good fuel ratios. Right now, I'm just setting up the dyno. We're going to strap this thing down and make some noise.
All right, first pull done. So this is a baseline, no tune, nothing's been done to the car as is, and it's making a whopping 189. Now, a few reasons that may be so low. We're thinking just because of the bolt-ons, like the intake manifold and everything, and the car's never been tuned, so I'm thinking that has a lot to do with it. So getting the tuner, all the info on the car now, so we can get everything plugged in, situated right, and then we're going to do a few more pulls without nitrous to try to really dial everything in. And we'll go from there, because that ain't going to cut it. Okay, so we had some time to think about what could be causing that initial baseline rip on the dyno to be so low. And a couple things to keep in mind. A, this was an automatic car, and I have never tuned it. So it still has an automatic ECU, and that's not helping us at all. And B, it has a colder set of plugs. If you remember when we did the nitrous, we went down 2 steps, or down 2 temperatures, whatever you want to call it, on the spark plugs. So things running colder, which gives us less power when the nitrous is off. So these are all things that can be easily corrected. Once we get the software in the ECU, we'll be able to ditch all the original automatic like safety things, and that should kind of fix a large chunk of that, which is interesting because that means I've been driving with that for a long time. But also we'll be able to tune for the colder spark, and we'll be able to tune for nitrous, of course. So a lot of good things to come. We're just getting the software thrown up into the ECU of this thing so we can actually get it tuned. We're just going to start tuning it NA with no nitrous. Just kind of make sure everything is as clean and as sorted as it can be before we crack open that bottle and start really making some power. All right, first real pull, actually tuned now. 239, that's just making up for the bolt-ons and no more automatic trans stuff. we're going in the right direction now. Well, interesting development here. So we did 2 pulls. The second one we changed, or the tuner changed the fueling, added a bunch of fuel, because the first one, the AFRs looked weird. So he was like, let me try to make up for that, add a bunch of fuel, and then the AFRs didn't change at all, which is, if you're unfamiliar with what that means, it's the air fuel mixture. So adding a ton of fuel should have changed that number because there's a lot more fuel in the air now. It didn't change at all, which means something's not right. So suspect that it's the O2 sensors just not doing their job. They're not correcting for anything because they were just sitting at a static number that should be changing throughout the pull. So yanking the O2s out, we're gonna swap them and go from there. Quick run to the parts store, O2s replaced. Everything is looking good. We just did a test hit to confirm that the O2s are actually working now. So the AFRs are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and things are starting to make sense. So the tuner just sent us a new tune, flashing that on the ECU now, and then we're about to do another pull. And we still haven't turned the nitrous on yet. We're just trying to dial this thing in like NA, and then we'll crack open the bottle and start getting some nitrous through this thing.
The next day.
All right, it is the next morning, coming at you guys from a hotel a little ways down the road from the shop. We were there until like 11:30 at night. Really didn't make a lot of headway on the tuning. We did about 3 or 4 pulls and the AFRs were just not moving. So that's, as you guys saw, we swapped out the O2s thinking that might be an issue, and the car still says it's running lean. Even on the last pull, the tuner threw everything at the fuel pump, meaning like maxed out the duty cycle, so it should be commanding all the fuel that pump can deliver, which is way more than the car would ever need. It should have been running super rich, and instead it's still running lean. So we pulled the pump, checked the like seal on that, and it seemed like it was okay. So we're wondering if the pump just isn't working. Maybe it's defective, even though it's a brand new AEM pump. So yeah, called it a night last night because it was getting super late. Gonna go back there right now, swap out the pump, either back to the stock one, or Tim, the owner of the shop, actually has that same AEM pump in his car, so we might just pull the whole assembly out of his car, drop it in mine, and see if that fixes anything, because we got to diagnose that issue first. And once we get that done and get the fueling right, the car should pick up quite a bit more power, and then we can finally start throwing nitrous at this thing. Kind of bummed that all of this happened because I am still out here, and I was supposed to be at Orange Show Speedway today doing some testing with all this extra power. Now that's not going to happen, which means we're going into hot pit, which is a week from today. We're going into that with a lot less practice than I had hoped.
All right, little update as we've been working quite a bit. We replaced all the fuel injectors, fuel line, fuel pump, intake manifold gasket, and probably a couple other things I'm forgetting. And I think we finally got it. I think part of the biggest problem was the intake manifold gasket, the original one for that Kinetics manifold, had like a tear in it. And I think we were just getting some unexpected air into the manifold, which was throwing everything off. But I guess it could have been the fuel injectors too, because we replaced those. So we're finally going in the right direction, which means we can finally start tuning. I'm sure you're hearing he's working on some partial throttle stuff there, just confirming that the AFRs are going in the right direction. So hopefully we're going to do some real pulls now and actually start seeing some difference in power. All right, 4 or 5 pulls later, finally everything's cleaned up, no issues. Out of those 4 or 5 pulls, there was like 1 horsepower variance between them all. So that means we got a healthy motor, a solid tune. It's time to start throwing some nitrous at this thing. We can finally see what it's really gonna make. This first pull is gonna be with the 35 shot that I've been running, just to make sure that the tune we have likes the nitrous, and then we'll up the shot from there. Here's our graph on the 35 shot. You can see that, made 265 horsepower and 276 torque just from a little 35 shot. All right, so everything went good with the 35 shot. We just swapped it out to a 50 shot. So we're working our way up here and we'll take it from there. All right, 75 shot of nitrous going in. Cross our fingers it goes well.
One eternity later.
All right, we're back home and we've got a lot to unpack. So we were there 2 days. I got there at like 10:30 or 11 in the morning on Friday, and I left at midnight on Saturday. Really, really long weekend. As I had mentioned, I missed out on a practice day at Orange Show, which I was hoping to get some practice with this new tune, the extra power, before Hot Pit. By the time you're watching this video, it's probably the day of Hot Pit. So tune into the live stream. Otherwise, I hope you're there. So what went wrong? Well, first, we didn't actually get started to tuning this thing until pretty late on Friday, and that's because we were using a remote tuner, and there was just some scheduling conflicts or miscommunications, whatever it was. So we ended up starting pretty late on Friday. It's not like we started at 10 in the morning when I got there. So that put us behind. And then once we finally started tuning, it was that AFR issue that I had mentioned. We got a tune thrown in the ECU, started doing a pull, and we were like, hey, it's kind of lean. So the tuner added more fuel, and then nothing changed. So the tuner said, I bet you the O2s are bad, because when O2s are bad, the AFRs just kind of flatline. That's the car's like safety mechanism because it's not really reading stuff properly, so it just kind of throws a flat number at it knowing that it will be safe. Okay, sounds fair. So we went to the parts store, bought O2s, swapped them out, did another pull, and it was still reading lean. Now, hindsight is 2020 because really we should have just stopped relying on the car's output for AFRs and used what was on the dyno. But because we were using what was on the cars, it sent us down a rabbit hole trying to find this issue. As I had mentioned in the video, we messed with the fuel pump even though we had just put it in. We did find the intake manifold gasket was pretty beat, so I'm glad we replaced that. But we swapped all the injectors. Fuel pressure regulator, which had its own issue, Tim fixed that, so I appreciate that. It just wasn't like mounted correctly where that nitrous fuel solenoid thingy mixes in. So there was quite a few problems that we did fix, but none of them were the actual problem that we were chasing, which was that the car just wasn't putting out the accurate number that the AFRs were. Because as soon as we hooked the dyno up to it and cut out the car, it was reading correctly. Obviously it was reading super rich, so then we had to, go back to a normal tune, but that showed us that the AFRs were not what the car said they were. Now, why that is, I don't know, but the tune that he put in basically just commands the car to do certain things no matter what it's reading. So it's gonna be fine, but it was definitely weird that the car just isn't reading the right thing. So I don't know if it's a software issue in the ECU or it's the ECU itself. I don't really know. All of this tuning stuff is totally uncharted territory for me, which definitely made it even harder because I couldn't be like, oh, let's check this, let's check that, because I don't really know what we're looking for. I was kind of learning the process as I was there. So I guess despite how long this took, that is something I'm grateful. Like, I learned a lot because we had to chase so much. Now, this definitely opened my eyes to the importance of putting a wideband in the Z. That's something we're going to be doing after Hot Pit. I had read online that it was important to do before going to a tuner, and I just didn't have the time. Everything's kind of in a rush to get ready for Hot Pit, but we're going to do that. Obviously, it's important. Obviously, I can't rely on the car. And now that we're feeding quite a bit more nitrous through this thing, I want to make sure that it's safe. So if I do ever see any red flags, I can shut it down and not shoot a piston out the side of the block. Also, just want to give a massive shout out and thank you to Tim at Power Nation. We went through so many issues, and the whole time he was just in good spirits about it. He said, let's try to fix this, let's try to fix that. And like I said, he found a lot of little issues that did need to be fixed. So even if it wasn't the issue we were chasing, still found them and still fixed them. But yeah, that's it. The car's tuned. I am still not sure if it's the best it can be, because really it only made like 280 with the nitrous, which doesn't seem like a lot. It did make 360 foot-pounds of torque, which is a lot. So I really don't know how long this motor is going to last, if that's okay, if a VQ can take that or not. So the torque is there, and I'm excited about that, because that's really going to be a huge difference, and that's really going to be helpful drifting. But the power just isn't what I expected, I guess, because we got like 235 with no nitrous. And that was a consistent, like I had said in the beginning of the video, we did 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 pulls, and they were all 234, 235, like right in there. That's when I was like, cool, we have a good baseline. And once we started throwing nitrous at it, he had to like pull timing back to kind of compensate and do all this other stuff. And it's weird to me that we're throwing a 75 shot at the car and we're only making about 40 extra horsepower. So maybe that's just how it works. One contributing factor to all that is I don't have a pressure gauge on the nitrous bottle, so I didn't really know what kind of pressures we were running, which can actually change a lot. So we could have a jet in the system that commands a 75 shot, but if the pressure in the bottle is not high enough, it won't actually deliver that much. So I actually got a gauge for the bottle, and we're gonna be using that moving forward, but that's definitely a variable that we didn't take into account for. So that could be the reason why we're a little short on power. Also, remember, we are just running pump 91. This thing would make quite a bit more power if I put it on E85, and that was one of the reasons that we put a bigger fuel pump in there, so that I can do that down the road if I want to stick with a VQ, which I don't know if that's what we're going to do. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are either watching Hot Pit on the live stream or you are here at the event, and if you are, make sure to come by and say what's up. The next video that comes out will be my Hot Pit recap, and I'm just so excited to be there. I cannot wait to share it with you guys, because it really is a dream come true. Thanks as always for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed, and of course, I'll catch you in the next one.